Hello there, and welcome to the tarot reading for our world for the month of October 2024. We are in the last quarter of the year already, and autumn is on its way. The sumac trees here are bright orange already, and the maple trees are turning red. So winter is coming. Once again, I had many questions to choose from, but the theme running through the ones I chose ended up having to do with the changes and the challenges to major institutions of our culture. Those are religion, deep state wars, and government. So those are pretty heavy questions. And of course, I went to Mother Nature to see what advice she might offer this month. So here are the questions. Number one, given them many in the Q, quote unquote Q, truth movement, truth and freedom movement are heavily based in religion, and that information is coming out about the mistranslations of the word Elohim as if it meant God, and that the Vatican is being revealed as part of the deep state corruption. What is the future of the Christian religion? So, what is the future of the Christian religion is pretty heavy. Question number two, what is the future of the deep state neocons that keep pushing Ukraine to fight Russia while sending Zelensky more money and more weapons? Question number three, how does our government in the US fare over the coming year? And number four, what advice does the animal kingdom have for the people of the US and the countries of the West at this time? So the cards drawn were, in response to question number one, we've got the Seven of Wands. In response to question number two, I drew the Eight of Cups. Question number three got the Death card. That's number 13 in the major arcana. And the last question from the medicine cards, I got number 30, the Rabbit. So question number one, given that many in the truth and freedom movement are heavily based in religion, the Christian religion, while information keeps coming out about the mistranslations in the Bible, as well as the egregious corruption in the Vatican, what is the future of the Christian religion? What is the future of the Christian religion? Ooh. With this question, we are setting out three influential variables and asking the cards for some insight into the future of one of the main religions in our world, the Christian religion. The card drawn here was the Seven of Wands, and you can see at first glance that it depicts a struggle or a fight of some kind with something or someone who has very few options. When you look at the card, you see a man standing on a bumpy green hillock at the edge of a cliff, and it looks like he stands on a small spit of land, sort of jutting out, perhaps from the side of a mountain, and there is nothing behind him. Nothing. He holds a wand in like a diagonal in a very defensive position. 6 other wands appear at the bottom of the card, and it's really difficult to tell whether those are enemies or defenders of his position. The man wears a yellow shirt, a green tunic, a shoe on his right foot, and a boot on his left foot. And the sky is bright blue. The basic message of this card carries the warning that, quote, the shoe is now on the other foot. which hints at someone or something having been in a position of power and taking advantage of, or maybe even victimizing others, but is now in the position of having to defend those actions. The hunter becomes the hunted, sort of thing. It's difficult to say whether the figure holding the wand is playing a game or whether there is a serious situation at hand, but given the nature of religion, it's likely a very serious matter if the religion wants to survive. The suit of wands is the suit of action, and the urging of the Seven of Wands is that it is time to take a new position, set up a new organization, develop a new worldview, or something along those lines. The advice that goes with this is to burn the boats when you arrive at the new shore, meaning that you can't go back to doing what you used to do. Something that would be good news if they were found to have been engaged in corruption or are offering something that is no longer relevant. When you look at where the man is standing, you can see that the ground is uneven and he has nothing to back him up. He's standing on the edge of a cliff and is forced to face what is coming at him. The yellow shirt symbolizes trying to explain, like intellectually, why he should be listened to, or perhaps why he should survive. But the green tunic indicates a lack of experience in dealing with a situation he finds himself in. That green tunic also calls for a fresh approach that's based in maturity. And together, green and yellow represent something of a wild nature that may have gotten out of control. The figure holds the wand in a diagonal position, and that symbolizes an attitude of channeling things from a higher power to a lower power. This has definitely been the attitude of the church. And since our question is about the future of religion, this hints at the nature of the struggle they will be caught in. People may no longer wish to be in the position of those at the lower power end of the stick, where the church dictates how they should think, feel, and behave. The fact that a figure has a shoe on his right foot symbolizes a certain level of civility and polish, kind of like an effort to flow with the times and fit in. However, the boot on the other foot indicates both a capacity for cruelty, a need to do some heavy internal work in order to fit the changing times, and a need for some external protection given the situation that they're in and their desire to survive. Boots are also a symbol of low-minded, controlling approaches, something that suggests like dirty tricks and may not indicate good survival prospects. The 6 wands at the bottom of the card kind of protrude into the setting at different heights, and this symbolizes the differing degrees of difficulty that the Christian religion may be confronted with. Since we are dealing with the variable of many Christian people involved in the effort to elect Donald Trump and save the US, there might be a degree of confusion regarding whether or not to trust their efforts as Christians in light of the information coming out about the Christian religion in general. People are liable to cross-pollinate the corruption of the church and the truth about the control exercised by the Vatican with the effort of the Christians trying to make America great again. So their alliance with the Christian religion could put their effort to save the US at risk. and may cause further fighting or a falling off of support. That bright blue sky says that there is an atmosphere of trying to keep things clear and lighthearted, but this may be inappropriate given the mix of corruption, deception, and harm that has gone on for centuries in both the church and the government. The overall message of this card is that some kind of information is coming out from under the blankets or from under the bushel basket, and it warns against resisting and asks us to be aware that facts can be altered, something that many people are already aware of. The Seven of Wands encourages all sides, the Christian church, those trying to make America great again, and those who would persecute the Christian church, to move in carefully directed and unhurried steps to reveal the truth. It also says that the situation as it exists is on the path of progress, which is good, and which would indicate that if the church wants to survive, it must move forward in alignment with the truth and the people it's trying to serve. The Seven of Wands is a card that calls for courage and sticking to core values and ethics. It warns people on all sides, those defending themselves and those who may be perceived as attackers, to renew and regenerate themselves first, before trying to move in a new direction. It calls for identifying values and sticking to them, come hell or high water. If the church wants to survive, it looks like it will have to make some very deep changes. The number 7, this is the Seven of Wands. The number 7 is a spiritual number to begin with, and it's an indicator of having crossed some kind of boundary that has resulted in the challenges it now faces. It says that there is wisdom available, but you have to be willing to look deep inside before taking action to correct and heal any perceived wrongs. This card says that the Christian religion will have difficulty surviving unless it comes up with the courage to face its opposition, its history, and its actions. It hints at the current situation being a test. Failing the test would probably mean failure to survive as a religion having any kind of power or meaningfulness. This card is known as the Lord of Valor. And keywords for the Seven of Wands are assessment, challenge, risk, vitality, ambition, sharply defined, rigid, fond of children, bossy, gambling, dominion, fight, leadership, the urge to sustain, negotiations, and uncertainty. So that's it for question number 1. Question number 2. What is the future of the deep state neocons that keep pushing Ukraine to fight Russia while sending Zelensky money and weapons? After looking at the entanglement of Christians, religion, and government, it occurred to me to look at those people who might be the opposite of Christians. So the attempt here was to drill down into the future of the deep state neocons and their plans to win Ukraine for themselves. I have often seen that they hope to take over Ukraine's rich farmland, its even richer deposits of hard-to-find minerals, and to rule both east and west from that location. So the card drawn here was the Eight of Cups. a card that shows a figure with a walking stick wearing a red cape, gray leggings, and red boots, walking away from a stack of 8 cups as if no longer satisfied with anything being offered. Cups are all about what life offers and includes things like feelings, experience, a sense of belonging, and beliefs, your belief system. The figure is walking along the edge of a river that is very rocky and that flows down from between 2 mountains. There's a sun and the moon, both in the sky above, and that sky is dark blue, representing nighttime. This is one of the few cards in the deck where the figure has his back to the observer. And this symbolizes turning one's back on something that was sought or fought for with great passion and zeal. The red coat that he wears indicates that there has been and still is a great deal of passion and energy, but the fact that the figure is walking away says that passion must now go in a new direction. Since our question is about the neocons and their future, this card says that they still have a great deal of passion for the fight in Ukraine, and the red boots back this up. However, something has changed in that effort. It hints that the pros and cons of the situation have become too obvious and overwhelming to keep going the way they were going. There are too many obstacles and handicaps that cannot be overcome, and they will end up turning away in order to find another path to achieving their will. That should be a heads up for everyone. Do not be fooled if they walk away. The 8 of Cups represents dreams and visions that are often not obvious. And this can indicate hidden agendas. The warning that goes with this is the need to understand your destiny and be aware the mills of God grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly small, which warns of being ground to a powder by the forces that were not anticipated. Watch out, deep state. The river flowing through the card represents the river of life, and there are many rocks in the water as well as twists and turns in its course. Isn't this just what we find in everyday living? So many problems, challenges, and things that don't go as we envisioned. The river flows between 2 mountains that represent additional difficulties and blockages, big ones. The mountains say the deep state neocons may have had moments of great achievement that they met and overcame, but this is the card of acting too hastily and ending up missing the goal. It calls for going back to the roots of life and correcting the mistakes made. The figure in the card is carrying a staff or leaning on a staff as he walks, and this represents both confidence in oneself as well as the acute awareness of one's shortcomings and failures. This awareness is added to by the stack of cups at the bottom of the card. The stacked cups carry a specific message that says, you may have thought you were working towards something seen as a big reward, but the only way to get that kind of reward is through love, humility, and a willingness to open up to your inner flow. The gap between the cups in that top row of the stack symbolizes a gap in the capacity to open to that inner flow and an inability to cope with the ever-widening range of feelings and unexpected situations created by whatever was being sought after. The Eight of Cups has a touch of sorrow and bitterness to it. And at the same time, there's also a hint of refusing to face the results of what has actually occurred, not wanting to take responsibility. In the case of the neocons and the fight in Ukraine, their results may be not only disappointing, but dangerous and threatening if it should result in legal charges against them. This card has many indicators that say they will run away from themselves and their results. The moon and the sun in the sky, both at the same time, symbolize a situation that embodies fighting for mastery. But it's not necessarily the kind of mastery that comes from a high level of consciousness, one that seeks to serve others or make the world a better place. And this is part of the driving energy that pushes them to abandon the current course of action and look for something new. This card is known as the Lord of Indolence and Stagnation. Indolence and stagnation. Indolence. Ah, you owe me that. And that feeling, that stagnation and indolence is due to overextending oneself and not honoring one's own limits and boundaries. The result is fatigue, feeling drained and emotionally ripped off. But they did it to themselves. The card is aligned with the planets Saturn, Pisces, and Jupiter. Saturn demands self-discipline, not just bull strength. If one is going to establish any kind of new structure, you will have to have self-discipline. Pisces warns against ungrounded illusions, and Jupiter promises expansion and adventure, but not necessarily success. So the number 8 itself carries a theme of preparing to move on or move ahead in a new direction. And the 8, aligned with cups, symbolizes the decline of a matter or leaving an undertaking behind. Given our question, that's a big change. Keywords for the 8 of Cups are desertion, putting things in perspective, success abandoned, managing, power, emotions, dreamy, limits, delay, burden, imaginative, expansion, profit, illusion, dissolving, loss of interest, and letting go. So that's it for question number 2. And question number 3. How does our government in the U.S. fare over the coming year? After looking at the attempts to revive America in question number 1, and the future of religion, and the future of the neocons in question number 2, I was shuffling the cards and thinking deeply about what this meant for our government and how it would fare over the coming year when the death card suddenly flipped face up and fell out onto the table. This did not look like a good future for the U.S. government, and so for a moment I considered putting the card back in the deck, but I didn't. That's always a message when that kind of thing happens. The message of number 13, the death card, is blunt. Something comes to an end. Something comes to an end. This card can be seen as either sadness that something wonderful has come to an end, or as relief that something awful has stopped. It doesn't matter which way you see it, whether as sadness or relief. The death card says that major change is upon us, and there is a great deal of work to be done. The card calls for positive aggression. That's a quote, positive aggression, and the strength to bring about the necessary and radical change, which makes sense given the amount of corruption that has taken hold and the way things have been unfolding over the past 5 decades. We saw this card back in August in relation to the situation between China and the US, and it warned of a loss of power on the world stage. Now here it is again, reinforcing that message, this time even more strongly, given the question asked. The death card warns us that the reaper is ready to do his work, which means that we are about to reap what has been sown. Even those who've not been directly involved in government will suffer a little bit because they'll have to witness the reaping process and hopefully learn from what they see. When you look at this card, you see a skeleton wearing a full set of black armor, riding on a white horse and carrying a black flag with 5 types of grain on it. The hat on the skeleton's armor has a red plume on it. Under the horse lies a dead king whose crown looks like it's almost being stepped on by the horse. In front of the horse stands a bishop whose staff has fallen to the ground. Near the bishop, 2 young girls are kneeling, with one of them kind of turned away, as if looking in another direction. In the background, a ship sails by on a river. There is a blue cliff wall that's quite high. The sun is coming up between 2 portals through which you can see the outlines of a city, and the sky is gray. That skeleton riding the horse represents the death of the government we are asking about. Sadly, the skeleton symbolizes a government that has died some time ago, but is still acting as if everything is normal. The saying that goes with this is, one can die before death occurs. Something can still be active long after death. The skeleton represents what our government is offering us and shows that nothing is being offered. It may throw us a few bones here and there, but there's no meat on the bones. The skeleton is wearing black armor, which symbolizes a dark cover-up of some sort. The armor serves to cover up the emptiness of what government is doing and to protect from being seen for what it really is. They don't want us to see what is really going on. And that red plume on the skeleton's hat represents passion, greed, love, wrath, blood, and soil. All elements associated with governance. Since our question is about how the US government will fare over the coming year, the death card says that even if nothing overt happens to destroy the US government, there will be a recognition that our government died long ago, and all that is left are the barest bones, the institutions of government. The realization will sink in that something is over, even if some of the structures are still in place and acting as if everything is working normally. The white horse represents not only death and destruction, but also completion. as if the work of our republic is now completed, or it has served who and what it was meant to serve. White horses also represent new beginnings. And the contrast between that black armor worn by the skeleton and the white horse emphasizes the black and white nature of the situation. Not very much gray there, except in the sky. Trying to gloss over the truth would be the equivalent of putting lipstick on a pig. It cannot be seen as anything other than an ending, which always carries the promise of starting over or stepping into something new. The black flag carried by the skeleton shows 5 different kinds of grain on it. That grain represents food, information we have been fed, and the varying nature of the many groups of people and their habits. They all have a different grain to them and their actions. The flag itself symbolizes calling attention to a theme or an ideology, as well as a call to action of those many groups of people who live under the influence of government. When this call is heeded, the flag hints that there need not be total destruction as much as there will be a revealing of the true results of the government's operations and work. The king without a crown, who is lying dead under the horse, symbolizes the government's loss of power, loss of respect, and an end to any ability to dictate how things will be or should go in the future. The bishop standing in front of the horse does not have a staff. It has fallen to the ground. And that symbolizes an inability to lead anybody, and perhaps the loss of followers who make up the population. The 2 young girls kneeling near the bishop represent immaturity and naivete on the part of the population. One of those young girls is already looking off in a new direction, which tells us that some portion of the people are already ignoring government and looking elsewhere for guidance. The presence of these children also brings up questions. Are we being childish and immature in our approach to government? Are we acting like children who want to be taken care of by our government? In the background, there's a river, and that represents the river of life. A ship carrying souls is sailing down the river. The ship represents a coming reincarnation of some kind and reminds us all things change as we move through life. And this is a reminder that all things can start anew. In the background, we also see a sun coming up over the horizon, and you can see the silhouette of the new city between 2 portals that resemble the portals of Boaz and Joaquin in the card of the high priestess. The 2 portals represent strength and courage and tell us that we will need these 2 qualities to deal with the change in government. The sun, that sun coming up, reinforces the idea of a new day, a new time, a new era, and the new city symbolizes the chance to build a better world, a better life, a little bit of paradise. In spite of death and change being the main messages of this card, that new city represents the need to rebuild everything. If we can muster up the positive aggression, remember that, positive aggression, that this card asks for. The gray sky warns against absence or lack of conscious attention. as well as indifference. In other words, pay attention. It calls for the dropping of prejudice because of the need to work together in order to navigate the time of change. The big question associated with the death card is, what do you plan to experience, to form, to put into motion and harvest during this life? Let me ask that again. The big question associated with the death card is, what do you plan to experience, to form, to put into motion, and to harvest during this life? It urges us to let go, to be unafraid in the face of death and change, and to prepare for loss. And it tells us that it's never too late to begin. It's never too late. The death card refers to the ongoing cycle of birth, maturation, decline, and death, and it often marks a transition to a new way of life or a new phase of existence. It does warn that much of what goes on in this cycle is involuntary. So you have to pay attention if you want to be prepared. It also says that this whole process can be very supportive and exciting, to see it as an opportunity to create something new by allowing the metamorphosis to begin. And that may be a welcome change for people who have been under stress for years. The number 4 is associated with the death card, and 4 represents manifestation and material reality, needing to deal with what is real. So keywords for the death card are end, the close, mortality, destruction, corruption, failure, inertia, hope destroyed, maturation, decline, final endings, change, harvest, and inevitability. And that brings us to our last question, number 4. What advice does the animal kingdom have for the people of the U.S. and the countries of the West at this time? You know, I wasn't going to consult the animal medicine deck because I thought the tarot would be too long, but because of the heavy nature of the questions this month, I decided to see what the message from Mother Nature might be. So once I drew a card, it was like, oh, I decided it was important to include it. The card drawn here was number 30, the rabbit, which is the card of fear. This is a pretty interesting draw, and the story that goes with this card is the story of Rabbit and his friend Eyewalker. Eyewalker had magic powers, and she used them to produce water when Rabbit was thirsty, then a bit later to produce food when he was hungry, and still later to heal him when he fell down a mountain. But the results of this help were that Rabbit became afraid of Eyewalker and shouted at her to stay away for fear she would destroy him. He was terrified of her power and told her to leave him alone, that he never wanted to see her again. The moral of the story is that because Rabbit did not understand his own abilities and the power of consciousness, he became known as the fear caller. By refusing to acknowledge and feel his fear so he could shift it or rework it into something good, he ended up manifesting exactly what he was most afraid of. Soon, Rabbit became a target for every wolf, owl, and big cat in the forest, and never realized he was calling these things to himself. The advice that comes with this card is to assess your position honestly and accurately. What are you seeing? What are you talking about? No reasonable or useful action can come from denial or deceit or misperception. Once you have an accurate view of your life and what is unfolding around you, make a key decision regarding whether to take some kind of action and run or hold perfectly still and wait out the situation. The outcome is not what is important. It is the fact that you looked around, made a decision, and acted on your own power. That is what's important. Rabbit energy calls for reassessment on a daily basis in order to stay current with the process you're undergoing. Daily basis, reassessment every day. It demands that you rearrange your way of seeing the circumstances around you and keep your eye on the doorways that are opening and closing from day to day. The warning that Rabbit brings is to stop worrying about the future that is not yet formed, or you will create exactly what you are most afraid of. Because you're creating. We create our future. He says, instead, focus on today and use the time and energy you have at your disposal to implement your key decision. Do you run or do you freeze and hold perfectly still? If you cannot shake your fears, then Rabbit says it's time to acknowledge them, feel them, immerse yourself in them completely, and let yourself see what happens naturally when you do this. What you will find is that after a few minutes of total immersion and perhaps a bit of abject terror, either the fears dissipate and you lose interest in them, or they become something to manage and respond to with common sense. If they dissipate, you'll feel relief. If they become something to manage and respond to, you will have the feeling that things are not out of control and you have options. So, take a little advice from Mother Nature and Rabbit energy to confront your fears and deal with them. Doing so can change your life. So I think we've covered all of our questions, and it's time to sum up what we've been given. So question number 1, we said, given that many in the Q, Truth, and Freedom movement are heavily based in religion, while information keeps coming out about the mistranslations in the Bible, as well as egregious corruption in the Vatican, what is the future of the Christian religion? We have several variables here, and we're asking about their effect on the future of the Christian religion. And the card drawn was the 7 of Wands, a card of something or someone engaged in a fight, but is out of options, and whose activities are out in the open and under various forms of assault. Since we're dealing with the variable of many Christian people involved in the effort to elect Donald Trump and save the US, there may be a degree of confusion regarding whether or not to trust their efforts as Christians in the light of the information coming out about the Christian religion in general. Their alliance with the Christian religion could put their effort to save the US at risk and may cause further fighting or a falling away of support. This is the card of confusion, struggle, and core values. Its advice is to move to an entirely new position, new shores, and burn the boats so you can't go back. Something that might force those who once adhered to religions to move into true spirituality. Question number 2. What is the future of the deep state neocons that keep pushing Ukraine to fight Russia while sending Zelensky money and weapons? And the card drawn here was the 8 of Cups, a card indicating that they will end up walking away from this fight. They will be forced to turn their backs on the situation because of too many obstacles that have overwhelmed their effort. The 8 of Cups demands that one opens to the deep self, not the deep state. It requires one to act with humility and service to others while taking carefully measured steps. Failure to do so results in overextending yourself. And that's then followed by an inability to cope with the ever-widening range of feelings and unexpected situations created by whatever was being sought after. Wow. Question number 3. How does our government in the U.S. fare over the coming year? And the card drawn here was number 13, the Death card. Not a pretty prospect for the U.S. government. This card represents big, big changes and the realization on the part of a population that something died a long time ago, but is still operating as if it were alive and well. This realization is followed by loss of respect, failure to follow the rules and dictates of the governmental remainders, whatever's left of it, and the need to embrace a new day. The Death card also points to a new beginning and the need for courage and strength to navigate this time. It points to a need to build a new life and or a new way of self-governance that transcends the old ideas. And the last question, number 4, what advice does the animal kingdom have for the people of the U.S. and the countries of the West at this time? And the card drawn here was number 30, Rabbit Energy. The rabbit is the card of fear, and the message from Rabbit is to confront and deal with our fears directly, or we will end up creating exactly what we fear the most. Since we are in a time of great change, this is very useful advice. And we do have dozens of options. Just a lot of them are outside the box. The advice is to feel whatever we fear and allow it to either dissolve or carry us into a whole new way of managing life and stress and uncertainty. Only by doing so can we rise above our fears. And we might even discover our own power. So that's it for this month. We had some heavy questions, but I hope you'll benefit from what the cards offer. Lots of insight in this set of cards. Thank you so much for listening, and make a great October.